You want to talk about finances? Fine. You contribute nothing to this house but noise and grief. As far as I'm concerned, you're not family anymore, Olivia. You're just a tenant living under my roof. The words bellowed with the full, terrifying force of my father's rage-fueled conviction seemed to suck the air right out of the room. They hit me with the force of a physical slap, stunning me into silence. Ricardo Martinez, my 60-something-year-old father, stood planted in the centre of the living room carpet. My carpet, chosen by me, paid for by my paycheck. His body trembling, veins bulging in his neck, his face suffused with a dangerous, apoplectic purple. Spittle flew from his lips as he spat the final venomous declaration. My roof! Across the room, my younger brother Leo, 35 going on 17, didn't even flinch. He remained sprawled in my favourite reading chair, the plush navy blue one I'd saved up for months to buy, a picture of calculated indolence. He didn't laugh, didn't gasp. He just smirked. A tiny, almost imperceptible, yet utterly infuriating lift at the corner of his mouth. It was the smirk of the victor, the spoiled child who always got his way, confirming Dad was firmly, irrevocably on his side. Checkmate, sis. My mother, Eleanor, predictably, evaporated into the background. She stood frozen near the fireplace mantelpiece, which held photos of happier times. Family vacations I'd partially funded, graduations I'd attended, vigorously, obsessively twisting a damp dish towel in her hands. Her gaze was locked onto the intricate pattern of the Persian-style rug, also chosen and paid for by me after the original carpet became hopelessly stained. Her entire being radiating a desperate plea to be anywhere else, to not have to witness this, to not have to choose. Choosing avoidance was her choice, of course, not family anymore. The 3 words echoed in the cavernous space that suddenly opened inside my chest. Just a tenant, under his roof. The absurdity, the sheer, breathtaking unfairness of it was a physical weight pressing down on me. This roof, these walls, the very foundation beneath our feet existed in its current state of solvency, purely because of me. Olivia Martinez, the sensible daughter, the responsible one, the one who traded dreams for duty. This comfortable 3-bedroom, 2-bath slice of suburban Austin reality, gaining equity by the minute in the city's insane housing market, was theirs to inhabit, only because my signature was on the dotted line of the mortgage. My painstakingly built credit score had weathered the underwriter's scrutiny, and my personal bank account automatically hemorrhaged $2,500 on the first of every single month to appease the lender. My mind tumbled back 7 years, the memory vivid and painful. Mum's voice on the phone, thin and stretched with panic, dissolving into racking sobs. Dad, usually voluble and opinionated, reduced to monosyllabic grunts, the silence radiating a terrifying blend of shame and despair. His small, independent contracting business, always precarious, had finally capsized, dragged under by a combination of unpaid invoices from a major client declaring bankruptcy and a sudden, costly health crisis. Gallbladder surgery, not covered adequately by their bare-bones insurance. Eviction from their cramped rental apartment wasn't just a threat, it was imminent. The notices were taped to their door. The word homeless, once unthinkable, became a chillingly real possibility. And Leo, bless his consistently irresponsible heart, was deep into his artisanal, ethically sourced bespoke dog biscuit phase, operating out of his latest girlfriend's already crowded kitchen. His contribution to the crisis was limited to vague pronouncements about hitting it big any day now, while simultaneously asking Mum for gas money. So, Olivia stepped up, because Olivia always stepped up. Good old, reliable Olivia, the family fixer, the designated grown-up since about age 12. The daughter who had a real job with benefits, the one who understood things like escrow accounts and amortization schedules. I remember consciously shelving my own aspirations, like putting beloved books onto a high, dusty shelf. The meticulously planned solo trek through Tuscany, postponed indefinitely. The down payment fund for a sleek, minimalist condo overlooking Ladybird Lake, raided and repurposed. Instead, I spent harried weekends dragging a reluctant mom through open houses she inevitably criticised. Too small, bad light, smells funny. Endured endless calls with mortgage brokers demanding yet another obscure financial document. And finally, sat numbly at a title company office, signing a stack of papers thick enough to stop a door, legally binding myself to this house, this burden, this family obligation. The profound relief that washed over Mom and Dad's faces when I placed the keys to 14 Maple Creek Drive into their hands. That memory had sustained me for a long time. It felt like I'd done something fundamentally good, something vital. The financial strain was immediate and intense, a constant low-grade hum of anxiety beneath the surface of my life, but I told myself it was worth it. I was providing a safe harbour for my family. Now, 7 years later, that safe harbour felt more like a prison, and I was both the inmate and the warden, funding my own confinement. Because the $2,500 mortgage payment was merely the tip of the iceberg looming over my finances. Austin property taxes, relentlessly climbing, demanded another $8,000 chunk every January, requiring careful year-round saving. Homeowners insurance added another $1,500. And then the utilities, keeping the lights on, the water running, the AC blasting during the brutal Texas summers, plus the essential high-speed internet connection that allowed me to perform the demanding marketing job that paid for it all. Easily another $400, sometimes $500, vanishing from my account each month before I even bought groceries. And maintenance? Houses, I learned, are entropy machines. The water heater choosing the precise moment I was on a critical deadline to erupt like a geyser in the laundry room. $1,200 emergency plumbing bill, paid via credit card because my emergency fund was still recovering from the previous unexpected expense, termite treatment. The section of fence that collapsed during that freak windstorm, $800 for materials and labour because Dad's back wasn't up to it, and Leo was too busy strategizing his next failure. Their contributions were negligible, almost symbolic. Mom received a modest social security check, most of which seemed to disappear on little comforts for Dad, or slipped quietly into Leo's perpetually outstretched hand. She might occasionally buy a bag of groceries, usually processed foods I didn't eat, or bake a batch of cookies. Dad, forced into early retirement by his health and the business failure, bristled at any suggestion of dependency. He'd sometimes mow the lawn with the powerful self-propelled mower I had purchased to make it easier for him, but only when the mood struck him, often leaving the edges ragged. His main contribution was occupying his armchair, consuming the premium coffee beans I bought, and offering unsolicited critiques of my cooking, my career, my life choices. Leo, of course, contributed a negative amount. He was a black hole of need, sucking resources and emotional energy into his vortex of irresponsibility, which led directly, inevitably, to the shouting match currently echoing off my living room walls. The catalyst, Leo's urgent, desperate need for $5,000. Now, today. His dog, Biscuit Empire, having crumbled into flour dust and recriminations, he was now pivoting to the brave new world of Amazon dropshipping, guided by his equally clueless friend, Chad. It was, according to Leo, a guaranteed, can't-miss, foolproof path to riches. Guaranteed, foolproof. Words that immediately set off klaxons in the mind of anyone possessing common sense, particularly when applied to Leo, whose financial history read like a cautionary tale. the $3,000 I'd lent him last year for his disastrous foray into meme crypto. Vanished without a trace, leaving behind only tax complications for me and a vague promise from Leo to pay me back when my coins moon. Spoiler, they never mooned. Predictably, he'd approached Mum and Dad first with his drop-shipping pipe dream. Equally predictably, they'd performed their ritualistic hand-wringing about empty pockets, followed by the inevitable pivot towards me, the family bank. "Olivia, mija?" Mom began, catching me as I was trying to unwind after a stressful workday, her voice adopting that familiar, cloying tone of gentle manipulation. "Your brother, he has this wonderful new idea. He sounds so passionate this time, so sure. Maybe you could see your way clear to helping him. Just this once. Think what it would do for his confidence." Perhaps it was the exhaustion. Perhaps it was the memory of the recent $800 fence repair bill still stinging. Perhaps it was just 7 years of accumulated resentment finally reaching critical mass. Whatever it was, the dam inside me broke. "No, Mom," I said, my voice quieter than I expected, but laced with an unfamiliar firmness. "I can't. And I won't." "Leo?" I turned to him, meeting his expectant gaze. "We need to be honest here. This isn't a wonderful new idea. This is another gamble, just like the crypto, just like the dog biscuits, just like the failed app before that. You need stability. You need a budget. You need a real job with a steady paycheck. I cannot keep bankrolling these fantasies." I gestured around the room, encompassing the very walls that sheltered him. "Do you have any idea what it costs to run this household? Every single penny I earn goes into keeping this roof over all our heads. There is no extra $5,000 slush fund." I tried to show them the spreadsheet I kept, the stark numbers proving my point, but Dad waved it away, dismissively. Leo's face instantly transformed from hopeful expectation to wounded indignation. "Wow, Liv! That's harsh. Way to kick a guy when he's down. I thought family was supposed to support each other's dreams." And that lit Dad's fuse. "Support!" he roared, surging to his feet. "She doesn't know the meaning of support. All she knows is money, money, money. Thinks she's better than us because she has some fancy corporate job." He advanced on me, jabbing a finger towards my chest. "Who paid for your college education, huh? Who sacrificed so you could have opportunities? Never mind the scholarships that covered 70%, the grants, the 2 part-time jobs I worked relentlessly. In his narrative, he was the sole benefactor. You live here in this big house, rent-free, contributing nothing of value, hoarding your money while your own brother struggles. Rent-free, contributing nothing." The world tilted. I opened my mouth to protest, to scream the numbers, the truth, the sheer unfairness of it all. But he steamrolled over me, his voice escalating in volume and fury. He dredged up every perceived slight from the past 20 years, twisting my attempts at financial prudence into selfishness, my need for quiet workspace into antisocial behaviour, my inability to magically conjure $5,000 out of thin air into a betrayal of familial duty. Leo stood by, nodding along, adding fuel to the fire with murmurs of, "Yeah, Dad," and "She just doesn't get it." Mum fluttered uselessly on the periphery, her contributions limited to whimpered pleas of, "Ricardo, please, your pressure. Olivia, honey, just say you'll think about it. Can't we all just be peaceful? Peaceful?" Peace in this house meant Olivia shutting up, opening her wallet and absorbing the dysfunction without complaint. And then, the coup de grâce. The words hurled like grenades, designed to inflict maximum damage. "As far as I'm concerned, you're not family anymore, Olivia. You're just a tenant living under my roof." My vision blurred. A roaring sound filled my ears. Without conscious thought, I turned, stumbled down the hallway on legs that felt like rubber, and retreated into my bedroom. The smallest room overlooking the noisy street, the one implicitly assigned to me when we moved in. I shut the door, the click of the latch sounding unnaturally loud, and leaned back against it, gasping for breath. The muffled sounds of Dad's lingering tirade barely penetrated the cheap hollow core wood. I slid down the door until I was sitting on the floor, my arms wrapped around my knees, rocking slightly. Not family anymore. The phrase wasn't just insulting, it felt like an amputation, just a tenant. The sheer ingratitude was a physical ache in my chest. The tears finally broke free, hot, angry, bitter tears. Tears for the years of sacrifice, the holidays skipped to save money, the promotions chased not for ambition, but for the salary increase needed to cover rising property taxes. Tears for the constant, grinding stress of being the sole financial pillar for 3 other adults, one of whom actively resented me for it. Tears for the fiction of the loving, supportive family I had tried so desperately to maintain. A fiction that had just been publicly, brutally shredded by the patriarch himself. The following days descended into a chillingly executed campaign of psychological warfare, orchestrated by Dad and gleefully assisted by Leo. Dad perfected the art of the hostile void. He moved through the house as if I were a ghost, his eyes sliding past me, his body subtly angling away if we occupied the same space. If I dared to speak directly to him, "Dad, the mail is here," or "Do you need anything from the store?" he would either ignore me completely or respond to Mom, who was usually hovering nearby. "Eleanor, tell that person I don't need anything." The deliberate refusal to even name me was a fresh daily wound. Leo, meanwhile, thrived in the toxic atmosphere. Freed from any lingering pretense of respecting my boundaries or my property, he treated the house like his personal playground and me like the unwelcome chaperone. My carefully curated work-from-home routine was constantly sabotaged. He'd take loud, rambling phone calls right outside my bedroom door while I was on important video conferences. He'd accidentally spill sticky soda on my work files, left momentarily on the kitchen table. He developed a sudden passion for blasting death metal music from the living room sound system, paid for by me, naturally, at unpredictable hours. The noise-cancelling headphones he'd broken, he claimed a power surge must have fried them, denying any responsibility. He used my car again without asking, leaving trash on the passenger seat and the pungent aroma of cheap air freshener attempting to mask the smell of cigarette smoke. His message was clear. You don't matter here. Your rules don't apply. Mum became a wraith, gliding through the rooms, with eyes red-rimmed from weeping, or perhaps lack of sleep. She communicated primarily through dramatic sighs and passive-aggressive comments disguised as concern. "Oh, Olivia," she'd sigh, observing me eating a sandwich alone at the kitchen counter. "It breaks my heart to see the family like this. So much tension. If only things could go back to normal." The unspoken accusation hung heavy in the air. If only you hadn't upset your father. If only you had just given Leo the money. She never once acknowledged Dad's cruelty or Leo's provocations. In her narrative, I was the immovable object disrupting the family harmony, the source of all unpleasantness. Eating became an ordeal. They'd sit down together for dinner, Dad pointedly taking his place at the head of the table, Leo lounging opposite, Mum serving plates piled high with food purchased with my debit card. They'd talk and laugh, or rather, Dad and Leo would talk, Mum would offer quiet interjections, pointedly ignoring the empty fourth chair. I took to eating microwaved meals in my room, the isolation amplifying the feeling of being an alien, an unwanted border in the very structure I maintained. Dad's words had become a self-fulfilling prophecy. He'd called me a tenant, and now I felt like one. Unwelcome, resented, and utterly alone, yet somehow still responsible for paying all the damn bills. Sleep offered little escape. Night after night, I'd lie rigid in the dark, staring at the shifting shadows on the ceiling, Dad's words playing on a loop in my mind. Not family. Tenant. My roof. The anger, initially a hot flare, began to cool, hardening into something sharp and crystalline. Okay, let's follow his logic. If I'm not family, if I'm just a tenant, then the entire foundation of our arrangement collapses. The unspoken agreement, my financial support in exchange for familial belonging, is null and void. He broke the contract. So, what are my obligations now? If I'm not family, then they aren't family either, in the context of this house. They are occupants. Occupants who pay no rent. Occupants who actively disrespect the property owner. Occupants who verbally abuse the person whose labour keeps them housed. My mind, trained in marketing strategy, started analysing the situation dispassionately. What's the logical next step when dealing with problematic non-paying tenants who violate the terms of residency? Eviction. The word hung there, stark and terrifying. Could I actually do it? Throw my own parents, my own brother, out onto the street? The ingrained guilt, the years of conditioning as the good daughter, screamed no. It felt monstrous, unnatural. But then Dad's face would flash in my mind, contorted with rage, spitting those hateful words, Leo's smug smirk, Mum's complicit silence. He set the terms, he drew the line. Maybe he'd inadvertently given me permission to enforce it. The thought sent a jolt of adrenaline through me, a confusing mix of terror and fierce, unexpected liberation. The tipping point arrived with brutal clarity a few days later. I was on a crucial video call with my company's vice president of marketing, discussing the launch strategy for a major new product. I had specifically asked for quiet in the house. 10 minutes into the call, I heard Dad's voice booming from the hallway, deliberately loud, talking to Leo about needing to clear out that cluttered office, my room, soon. Yeah, Leo agreed, his voice equally audible. Place would make a killer gaming room. Needs a bigger TV, though. They were discussing the appropriation of my essential workspace, my only private haven, as if my presence, my needs, my ownership were utterly irrelevant. My face flushed crimson on camera. I saw the VP raise a questioning eyebrow. I mumbled an apology, cut the call short, and felt a wave of cold fury wash over me. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. It was a deliberate campaign to erase me from my own home. That night, trembling, I poured out the entire sordid saga to Chloe over FaceTime. Her face transformed from sympathetic concern to incandescent rage as I recounted Dad's words, Leo's antics, Mum's enabling silence, and the final insult of the office takeover plan. Hold on, Chloe interrupted, her eyes blazing. Let me get this straight. Your dad, who lives rent-free in the house you bought, declared you not family and called you a tenant, and now they're planning to confiscate your office so King Leo can have a gaming room. Olivia Martinez, are you hearing yourself? Yes, I choked out, fresh tears streaming. Okay, deep breaths, Chloe commanded. You are not the villain here. You are the victim of colossal, mind-boggling ingratitude and manipulation. And you know what victims with legal ownership and financial leverage do. They stop being victims. Her voice was firm, resolute. Call a locksmith, Liv. Call one right now. Change every single lock on that house. He wants to play landlord? Fine. Show him what happens when tenants break the rules. It's the only language these people seem to understand. Her righteous anger was the external validation I desperately needed. It cut through the thick fog of guilt and obligation that had clouded my judgment for years. She was right. It was drastic, it was terrifying, it would likely sever ties permanently. But what other option was left? Continuing like this was psychic suicide. Dad had redefined our relationship. It was time I accepted his definition and acted accordingly. My fingers felt like ice, clumsy and numb, as I Googled 24-hour emergency locksmith Austin. I scrolled through the listings, heart pounding erratically. I found a company, Austin Lock and Key, with excellent reviews and clear weekend availability. I checked the time, 4:15 p.m. on a Saturday. Bingo night. For Mum and Dad started at 5 o'clock. Leo had vaguely mentioned going downtown to scope out potential retail locations. Translation, meet Chad for beers. The window was narrow, but it was there. It felt like stepping onto a precipice, the point of no return. But the alternative, continuing to live under this crushing weight of disrespect and financial drain, felt like a slow, suffocating death. Taking a shaky breath that didn't quite reach my lungs, I dialed the number. "Yes, hello," I said, my voice sounding strangely high-pitched. "My name is Olivia Martinez. I need a locksmith to come to my residence as soon as possible to rekey all exterior door locks." I gave the address, 14 Maple Creek Drive, feeling a dizzying sense of unreality. Dave from Austin Lock and Key arrived remarkably quickly, his truck pulling up less than 45 minutes later. He was a large, calm man with kind eyes behind safety glasses, radiating an air of quiet competence. He seemed to take in my pale face and the tense set of my shoulders with a practiced, non-judgmental gaze as I let him into the unnaturally quiet house. "Rough day?" he asked gently, setting down his heavy toolbox. "You could say that," I replied, trying for a casual tone that utterly failed. "Just feel the need for some enhanced security. A fresh start." He nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. He'd probably seen situations like this before. "Right then, let's get you secured." He didn't ask any more questions, just went methodically about his work. The sharp, metallic whine of his drill removing the first lock cylinder from the front door echoed through the house, sounding like a surgeon's tool severing something vital. I flinched at the noise, wrapping my arms around myself. He worked with practiced efficiency, moving from the front door to the back door off the kitchen, then to the side door connecting the garage to the house. Each turn of his screwdriver, each click of a new pin tumbling into place, felt like another step across the Rubicon. It took less than an hour. Finally, he gathered the old, now useless lock cylinders and handed me a small ring holding 3 brand new identical keys. Their brass edges felt sharp and cool against my sweating palm. "All done, Mom," he said, presenting the invoice. The $387 felt simultaneously like a fortune and the best money I'd ever spent. "You're all secure now." The weight of those keys felt immense, symbolic. Keys grant access. Keys deny access. They were the physical manifestation of the boundary I had finally, irrevocably drawn. After Dave drove away, the silence that descended was profound, almost suffocating. The house felt enormous, empty. I walked from room to room, compulsively checking each new lock, turning the deadbolts, rattling the knobs. Solid, secure, mine. I texted Chloe an update. "It's done. Locks are changed. Now the waiting game begins." Terrified. Her reply came instantly. "You rock star!" Deep breaths. "You did the right thing. The hard thing, but the right thing. Call me the second they show up. I'm on standby with virtual popcorn and moral support." Her humour helped, momentarily cutting through the thick dread. Every tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, a family heirloom Mum insisted on bringing ironically, seemed magnified. Every distant siren, every neighborhood dog bark, every car turning onto Maple Creek Drive sent jolts of adrenaline through my system. I paced the living room, my footsteps echoing unnervingly on the hardwood floors. I straightened pictures on the walls. I rearranged coasters on the coffee table. Waiting was torture. What would they do? How furious would they be? Could I withstand the inevitable storm? Around 9:35 p.m., the familiar rumble of Dad's aging Buick broke the stillness. Headlights swept across the front window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. My breath caught. Car doors slammed, Dad's heavy, Mum's lighter thud. Their footsteps crunched on the gravel path leading to the porch. I retreated into the shadows of the hallway, my heart beating a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Silence for a moment. Then, the unmistakable, jarring sound of a key scraping uselessly against metal tumblers. A pause. Muffled confusion. What the... Eleanor, did you lock the deadbolt from inside? Dad grumbled. No, Ricardo, I didn't touch it. Mum's worried reply. More scraping, louder this time, tinged with frustration. Then, sharp, impatient knocking began. Olivia, are you in there? What's going on with this damn lock? Open the door. Dad's voice was laced with annoyance, but not yet full-blown anger. He assumed incompetence, not intention. Just then, a second set of headlights illuminated the driveway. Leo's sputtering hatchback. His car door slammed and his footsteps joined theirs on the porch. Yo, what's up? He asked, more key scraping, his key this time. Dude, my key isn't working either. What the hell? That's when the serious banging started. Heavy, rhythmic thuds against the solid wood door. Olivia, open this door! What kind of stupid stunt are you pulling? Ricardo was yelling now, his voice tight with rage, rattling the doorknob with violent force. Mum started wailing, a high-pitched, panicked sound. Olivia, let us in, please. My legs felt weak, my mouth dry. This was it. The moment of confrontation. Taking several deep, deliberate breaths, trying to channel some of Chloe's fierce conviction, I walked on unsteady legs towards the front door. I flipped on the porch light, then peered through the peephole. 3 faces swam into view, distorted and grotesque in the tiny lens. Dad's apoplectic with fury, Mum's ravaged by tears and utter confusion, Leo's a mask of sneering disbelief. My hand trembled as I reached for the deadbolt, sliding it open with a soft click. But I left the heavy-duty security chain, installed by me after a neighborhood burglary scare 2 years ago, firmly engaged. I cracked the door open perhaps 4 inches, a sliver of the dimly lit hallway visible between the door edge and the frame. The damp, cool, night air carried the scent of jasmine from the neighbour's garden, a surreal contrast to the ugly scene unfolding on my porch. Dad, I started, amazed that my voice came out relatively even, though it felt thin in my own ears. Just a few days ago, you stood right here in this house, and you informed me very clearly that I was no longer considered family. Don't you dare throw my words back at me, he snarled, lunging towards the small opening, stopped short by the sturdy chain. You open this door now, you disrespectful child. I'm not being disrespectful, Dad, I countered, gripping the door edge tightly to steady myself. I'm simply accepting the terms you dictated. You said I wasn't family. You called me a tenant living under your roof. I paused, meeting his furious gaze through the narrow gap. But you were fundamentally mistaken. This has never been your roof. I held up the mortgage statement I'd grabbed from the entryway table, angling it so the masthead with my name and the payment details were clearly visible in the porch light. This is my house. Legally, financially, Olivia Martinez. That's the only name on the deed, the only name the bank cares about. My salary pays for this roof, these walls, the electricity lighting your faces right now. I took another breath, the hardest one yet. And since I am, by your own declaration, no longer family, you, Mom and Leo, no longer have my permission, as the homeowner, to reside in this property. Your implied tenancy is terminated, effective immediately. The impact of those words was instantaneous and devastating. The shouting stopped. The banging ceased. Utter, dumbfounded silence fell, broken only by Mum's ragged sobbing. They stared at me, mouths slightly agape, as if I had suddenly morphed into a monster before their very eyes. Disbelief warred with dawning horror on their faces. Ricardo recovered first, his face contorting into a mask of sheer hatred. You wouldn't dare!" he sputtered, his voice hoarse. "You evil, unnatural, ungrateful whelp! To throw your own flesh and blood out onto the street. Have you no shame? No heart?" He started threatening then. Lawsuits, police intervention, calling every relative he could think of to condemn me. Leo, recovering his swagger, jumped in. "She's nuts! Totally lost it! You can't just do this, Liv. It's illegal!" It wasn't. I'd quickly checked basic tenant law. They were occupants, not leaseholders, and my ownership was undisputed. Mum dissolved completely, clutching at Dad's arm. "Olivia, please! Mija, por favor, think about what you're doing. Your father, his health, he can't take this stress. Where will we sleep tonight? What will people say?" Her pleas, usually so effective, bounced off the new armour I seemed to have acquired. The shift from entitled fury to raw panic was palpable. They were realising, perhaps for the first time ever, that their security wasn't guaranteed, that my role as the family safety net wasn't unconditional. Dad dramatically clutched his chest, leaning heavily on the porch railing, though his breathing seemed more enraged than strained. Leo frantically scrolled through his phone contacts, his bravado evaporating into visible anxiety. The absolute, terrifying reality of being locked out, with no resources and nowhere to go, hit them like a physical force. Watching their carefully constructed world crumble was agonizing, a deep, primal part of me wanting to retract the words, undo the action. But the memory of Dad's pronouncement, of Leo's smirk, of years of quiet erosion of my own life, held me firm. "This isn't happening because I'm heartless," I said, my voice trembling slightly again, but my resolve holding. "This is happening because of the choices you made, the words you spoke. Actions have consequences, Dad." I looked pointedly at each of them through the crack. "I am giving you 1 hour, 60 minutes. You need to call someone, Aunt Rosa, Uncle Javier, anyone, to come and get you. If you are still on my property after 1 hour, I will have no choice but to call the Austin Police Department and report you as trespassers." "But our things," Mum wailed, her face crumpling. "Our clothes, Ricardo's pills, my mother's locket." "You can schedule a time with me next week," I stated, keeping my voice as level as possible. "I suggest Tuesday or Wednesday afternoon. You may return then, accompanied by whoever assists you tonight, and perhaps with a police escort, present to ensure civility, to retrieve your essential personal belongings only. Medications, toiletries, clothing currently in season, vital documents, small sentimental items like photo albums. That is all. The furniture, the larger items, those remain here for now, until further arrangements can be potentially discussed much later. This is not negotiable. 1 hour. Before the next wave of pleading or threats could begin, I took a deep breath and pushed the door shut, the security chain sliding back into its track. I twisted the deadbolt lock firmly into place. The solid thunk echoed in the suddenly silent hallway. I leaned my forehead against the cool, smooth wood of the door, my entire body shaking uncontrollably now. Tears streamed down my cheeks, tears of profound grief for the final, irreparable shattering of my family, tears of fear for the unknown future, but also, undeniably, tears of immense, liberating relief. The storm had broken, and I was still standing. The aftermath was a blur of muffled shouting from the porch, frantic phone calls, and eventually the arrival of headlights belonging to my Aunt Rosa's familiar minivan. Peeking through the living room blinds, my heart aching despite everything, I watched the grim, silent loading of a few hastily packed duffel bags and suitcases. My father's back was rigid with fury. He refused to even glance towards the house. My mother stumbled towards the van, weeping uncontrollably into a tissue. Leo slammed the van's sliding door shut with vindictive force before getting into the passenger seat. As the taillights disappeared down Maple Creek Drive, a silence unlike any I had ever experienced in that house descended. It was vast, echoing, heavy with loss, yet paradoxically light with possibility. I walked through the rooms. My living room, my kitchen, my hallway. I touched the walls I painted, straightened the pictures I hung. The air felt different, cleaner, breathable. For the first time in 7 years, the house felt truly, unequivocally mine. The following weeks brought the expected fallout. A barrage of angry, guilt-inducing voicemails from Dad, which I saved but didn't listen to, tearful, pleading calls from Mum, which I screened, and a smattering of texts from cousins and distant relatives calling me everything from cruel and heartless to mentally unstable. I crafted a calm, factual email explaining the situation. Dad's declaration, the long-term financial burden, the lack of contribution, the final straw regarding my office, and sent it to Aunt Rosa and a few other key family members who might be acting as unwilling hosts or conduits. I attached copies of the property tax bill and a mortgage statement, highlighting my name and the amounts. I didn't expect understanding, only perhaps a cessation of harassment. To my surprise, while Aunt Rosa remained reserved, the flying monkey texts mostly ceased. Facts, it seemed, were harder to argue with than emotional appeals. The supervised visit to retrieve their belongings was one of the hardest afternoons of my life. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. They moved silently through the house under the watchful, impassive gaze of Officer Miller, piling clothes into boxes, gathering toiletries, Dad pocketing his medication bottles with grim finality. Leo tried to grab a video game console, but I calmly pointed out it wasn't on the essential personal belongings list, and Officer Miller quietly backed me up. The only words spoken directly to me were Dad's parting shot as he stood on the porch for the last time, his eyes burning with cold hatred. "You'll regret this, Olivia. You mark my words. You'll die alone." Then he turned, walked stiffly to Aunt Rosa's waiting van, and didn't look back. His words stung, a final twist of the knife. But as I closed and locked the door behind them, the click echoing in the now truly empty house, I didn't feel alone. I felt free, bruised, grieving, but fundamentally, powerfully free. The process of reclaiming my space began almost immediately. I dismantled the spare bed in Leo's former room, donating the mattress and hauling the frame to the curb. I set up my proper ergonomic desk chair, my dual monitors, my files, my office. I bought a ridiculously cheerful yellow duvet cover for my own bed. I threw out the half-empty container of Dad's favourite, expensive coffee beans. I played my music, loud, while I cleaned. Small acts of liberation, staking my claim not just legally, but emotionally. I started sleeping through the night for the first time in years. Then, yesterday afternoon, Aunt Rosa called. Her voice was heavy with exhaustion and strained patience. Life in her crowded 3-bedroom house, already full with her own family, was becoming unbearable. Ricardo, apparently, had sunk into a deep, brooding depression, refusing to leave the guest room, barely speaking. Eleanor cried constantly, lamenting her lost home and her cruel daughter. Leo, true to form, was contributing nothing, complaining about the lack of privacy and eating them out of house and home. Their welcome had worn thin. Aunt Rosa, ever the reluctant mediator, gently broached the subject. Could I, perhaps, find it in my heart to help them just a little? Not take them back, of course not, but maybe help with the security deposit and first month's rent on a small, cheap apartment. Just enough to get them settled, Olivia, she pleaded softly. Give them a chance to land on their feet, a fresh start away from here. She detailed their pathetic living situation, clearly aiming for maximum guilt induction. And so, I sit here in my quiet, peaceful, wholly owned house, facing another crossroads. The immediate crisis is over, but the tendrils of obligation, of deeply ingrained familial duty, still pull, however weakly. After drawing such a definitive, painful line, what is the right, the healthy course of action now? A. Offer a one-time, strictly limited financial gift, specifically for a rental deposit and first month's rent, paid directly to the future landlord to avoid misuse, making it absolutely clear this is the final act of assistance and requires no ongoing contact or obligation. Or B. Tell Aunt Rosa firmly but kindly that while I feel sympathy for their situation, their current housing insecurity is the direct result of their own choices and my father's words, and I cannot and will not continue to financially enable them or undermine the boundary I set for my own well-being. Which path leads to true resolution, not just for them, but for me? What would you advise?